Hello and good morning. Welcome to the webinar Inspire Innovation and Drive Growth Using Design Thinking. My name is Salam and I am the founder and president of Sodales Solutions. Previously, I used to work on complex, large IT projects and revive them and bring them back on track and really save the projects from failure. And over the past 1.5 years, I've been working with my team to build our startup. And Sodales Solutions is a SAP mobile partner based out of Canada, and we are an award-winning SAP partner. We bring rapid, simple, and cost-effective approach to delivering mobile solutions as well as user experience design. We are certified in design thinking, and many of our team members came from SAP Germany and focused on Fiori, mobile apps, and HANA. Our core is business process simplification and building cross-platform and device-agnostic apps, and also integration with big data. Today's webinar is being recorded. You'll be able to ask me any questions if you have in the chat window, and I would love to answer. In the end, I will also send you the recorded link of the webinar as well as the presentation material. A little bit about ourselves. Recently, we won an award from Microsoft and SAP through an apps challenge where we built a very innovative application for the month-end close process in SAP. And this was something that was inspired by the concept of Fiori and allowed customers to leverage what they already have in their platforms and in their licensing model. So it made the usage of mobile and process simplification very easy and quick. We also recently won an award from Google, an SAP Apps Challenge. This was the first SAP partner-built Fiori app where we demonstrated that Fiori can be a collaboration tool amongst different enterprises and allows you to collaborate data and information that goes beyond your boundaries. In addition, we were recognized at multiple places by SAP as well. So as this is a little bit more about us, we had a success story at Sapphire and also the Fiori, certification, certified apps as of this year. So that's a little bit about us. And today, what we want to do is teach you the benefits of design thinking. So design thinking is something that is becoming very famous and more and more popular within the innovation framework. But there is a lot of ambiguity or not enough knowledge about design thinking, especially there isn't enough knowledge available on the internet when it comes to the technology innovation piece. So we want to bring that awareness. And this is something that we use on day-to-day basis for all the problems that we work with our customers. And so what we will do today is teach you a little bit about design thinking and then teach you how it is it helps with cost savings and time savings for technology innovation, especially with all the new things that are coming up. And then finally, we'll show you a customer case study of our recent customer and their success with design thinking. Okay. So what is design thinking? If you want to know in the first thing about design thinking, you have to know that this is allows you to innovate under constraints. It's not something that is something fancy and very expensive to do, and you have to bring some, Einstein type of people. Actually, anybody can do design thinking as long as they follow the steps that are part of the design thinking guide. And what it does to you is it allows you to bring a human-centric approach to problem solving. But how it is done is It's done in a very cyclic way, just like agile methodologies. And what you do is at problems that are ill-defined and are ambiguous. The key ingredients of design thinking are, of course, empathy for the users. And there is a framework that design thinking teaches you or forces you to use that makes you empathize with the user. And then, of course, a lot of visualization. And then you work with the users to co-create solutions. And once it is done, you have rapid prototyping, like an experimental approach to solve the business problem. So how is it done? So we'll learn about that in today's webinar. Just so you know, design thinking has been out there for many, many, many years. It's just that previously it was more being used on the business side of things, business strategy, and when companies were launching new products, and when they were building new products. But lately, especially with SAP, uh, what's been noticed is that the cycle time of how quickly new technologies are coming out in the market and how quickly you have to adopt them and learn about them, and you're often confused. Well, I have all these other things sitting in my platforms. What do I use? What do I throw away? And what do my users really want? What do I need today and what do I need in future? All these questions you can answer using the design thinking methodology upfront. So think of it when you are scoping out your SAP projects, or any technology projects. Think of design thinking as a way to find the right problem and then solving the right problem under the constraints that you have, and making it the more optimal way of solving it. So it's just, I think what we need to know is that within technology space, it's still becoming more popular, but not there's not in a lot of people I notice who have adopted it, and just I think it's because of the knowledge difference between people. So how is design thinking different? So I'm gonna tell you a little bit about that. If you remember, when we were doing SAP projects in the past, you would go to a customer site and we would spend weeks or days in doing a blueprint. We would go through a requirement checklist and something that the customer IT team has already done, and they have a checklist that's in front of them. And then, based on that checklist, you create your blueprint agenda, and you kind of scrub the topics. And then when you go to the blueprint workshop, you're in a room with all the business users and IT people, and you are doing a presentation and you're teaching them about it and gathering requirements. So, and once that is done, you go back and you start developing, and you're also sharing knowledge throughout the process, and then you go to UAT. Well, what we are saying here is that that is a very linear approach of solving a problem. And that is something that may not work now. And the reason for that is that why is design thinking different from the traditional approaches? So the traditional approaches today, it is believed, will no longer work because they are more suited for human problems where not a lot of human beings are involved, and we have a very, very clear understanding of what problem we are solving, exactly know what we are solving, what is a real problem, because it's very common to confuse a problem with its symptoms. And then thirdly is we have past data and a lot of past experience for solving the same exact problem. So if you remember in the ERP times when we were all focusing on ERP projects, we used the linear approach, the ASAP methodology, and we actually built really, really successful projects doing that. But the moment we included some new technologies, or we had a problem that was kind of unique or exotic, we had a lot of uncertainty, and we introduced something that had could have a big impact on users. Or even if you were doing an ERP project and you had a lot of people involved, then in that case too, you would always saw adoption issues, or users complaining that they don't like the solution. So how does design thinking solve that upfront? Well, first of all, design thinking will force a framework on you, just like ASAP methodology, where you have blueprint, realization, UAT, and go live. So it will force a framework on you where you'll be forced to have a deep understanding of the customer. And then it will enable a way where you can involve all the parties without creating a chaos. So when you have a process or a problem you're solving, for example, reporting is a good problem example, um, a reporting solution. So it touches a lot of people, executives, end users, people on the road, people in the office, and something like that, solving something like that would be very, very beneficial with design thinking. And the third one is now, because all of these new technologies are coming out, HANA, Fiori, mobility, even within ERP, all sorts of things, cloud, we are being struck with new innovations all the time. And when we are recommending things to our solutions, we have to think in new ways. So often the problem that the customer is thinking he has may not be the problem. Also, because even the customers that we are working with are themselves, or the users that we are working with are themselves facing new challenges because of new industry regulation or geography-based requirements. So it's always an ill-defined problem you're dealing with. And of course, with the new innovations, we don't have a lot of past data to prove how this problem was solved. So that's where design thinking come into play. And how is it done? Is I'm going to give you an overview today, and we'll go into more details in our next follow-up webinar. So it uses something called a persona-based approach, where in one of the steps within design thinking is where you actually define one of the persona or role of that process. And it doesn't mean that if within the process that you're solving, you have 100 personas, so you need to create 100 different roles to solve the problem. Just by using one or two representatives puts your own mindset into an empathy-based framework. And that's the whole purpose of doing this exercise. So using this persona-based approach, we use a very hands-on approach where we do the journey mapping of the process. We figure out what the problem in using insights, and then it's very visual, and in a very visual way, you draw the entire story of what the users are going through. And once the story is drawn, you figure out what are those unhappy moments in that process that they went through, and how we can convert those unhappy moments into happy moments. And that phase is called ideation. And in the end, you create, at the end of the design thinking, you create a prototype. The prototype is not like the prototypes we created in the past, where you actually build something in the system. In fact, while doing design thinking, you don't touch any system. You don't even have a laptop in the room. You are building all of your prototypes on cardboard or on paper. And these are called low fidelity prototypes because you can just scrap them, and maximum 15 to 30 minutes you should to be able to create your prototype. And if you don't like it, you throw it away and build another prototype. And through feedback is what you refine your prototypes. So that's a high level overview. I'm going to show you the steps next in the next few slides. So just wanted to show you visually how it looks. You have people working very well together. If you notice, another thing is that when we used to do blueprints, often we notice a lot of political boundaries within our users based on their knowledge gap or their level in the company. They had political boundaries. But with design thinking, when you divide your user groups into different groups and make them work on the problem and ideation and brainstorming, and you time that phase, each of the phase of the design thinking, everybody is forced to come up with ideas, and everybody is forced to contribute without being judged or without being influenced by their boss or somebody else, and no idea is considered crazy, and that's where you really figure out the best way of doing things. And that's what I'm going to show you through our customer example as well. So here's an example of what I mean by low fidelity prototype. And this is something that we did with a customer. Is a low fidelity prototype at the end of design thinking could be, something that we created on a paper of what the solution looked like, how things flow together and work together, and what is it that they need. And this is not something that we build from IT side, or we as consultants will. We guide the users, but the users are the one who actually build it and say, this is what I need. And in the end, a high fidelity prototype could be something that you make in a PowerPoint presentation, and or with just maybe a front end application. There is a lot of system type of or integration type of work at that time. And I think that is another way to get good feedback and figuring out your product or service features that you want to include. One thing that we found surprising with our experience in design thinking with customers was that we were trying to do too much initially, or the customers were trying to do too much initially. And with design thinking, they realized they didn't need to. They didn't even need all those functions at all. And all they needed was something very targeted for their needs. And there was a simpler and easier way to achieve that. And, they just were thinking in terms of a system and not thinking of the ideas. And therefore, they didn't know that there were other ways of doing things. So I'm going to show you some step-by-step process of design thinking and explain how it offers cost and time savings in terms of technology innovation. And that's where we'll spend a lot of our time today in the webinar. So first thing you have to know is when you're doing design thinking, everybody in the room or you and your customer has to say and has to believe that we are embracing ambiguity. And what do I mean by that? If you remember in the past, when we were asked by a customer to provide a solution for, say, reporting, we kind of jump to the conclusion and say, let me just give you a business intelligence system. And based on where you're coming from, Microsoft or SAP or any other background, you would propose that kind of solution. But I think what we're saying here is that we have to scrap this mentality and we have to embrace ambiguity and have a learning mindset and say, oh, wait a second, are we solving the right problem? And once we embrace that, we come to two major parts of design thinking. So design thinking is divided into two major parts. One is finding what problem you're solving, and secondly, solving the problem. So if you remember in the past, we would not spend so much time in problem finding. We would actually have a requirement checklist, given that we already knew what the problem was, and we would then start solving it by first doing a lot of documentation up front because we wanted to get sign-offs and we wanted to lock the scope. And often we lock the scope and we finish the project, but the customer was very unhappy or the users were very unhappy. They didn't know what they wanted in the beginning, and they signed up for something that they may not even have needed. So in design thinking, you actually, when you embrace ambiguity, not only you embrace ambiguity for yourself, but for your users as well, and not force them to to build something they don't need. So you find the problem and then you solve it in a way that it's the solution is created by the users in a very hands-on approach. And the most beautiful thing about design thinking is that it's just done in such a short time. So you don't spend months in doing it, you actually spend a day. If it's a mega business process, you're able to run the entire workshop in one day. If it's many business processes and lots of areas that you need to consider, then you can have multiple workshops, but you could still do a high level and then do broken down workshops for each of the process later on. But I think doing this approach saves you a lot of time and a lot of commitment up front when the or users or customers don't even know what they need. And they don't even understand the terminologies that you're saying, and they're just there's miscommunication. So throughout the design thinking, you would be creating choices and making choices within different phases of design thinking. So when we create choices, we have a divergent approach. So we have a lot of ideas or a lot of choices, but when we make a choice towards the end of that phase, we have a convergent approach. And this is where now we line up all the phases of design thinking on top of it, and we see how they come together. So there are 7 phases of design thinking. Some people have break it down into more, but I think 7 is a good number. I actually have recently written a blog about this as well. I will share that with the group at the end of the meeting. So the first step is scoping. So the scoping here means something very different. In the past, when we did scoping, we confused it with blueprint, and or maybe the meeting that our management had with the management team of the customer, and they scoped out the project, and that's what we called scoping in the past. In design thinking, scoping means just getting to know what the problem, what the high-level problem statement is. So you would have some context of it. It doesn't matter at that point if it's the right problem or the wrong problem, but as long as you need to know what is the context of the problem, who is the one who's feeling the problem. So that's what scoping means, and in terms of design thinking. And in often cases, you will be doing this exercise before even going to the client side or before even talking to your users. So you identify an opportunity, and this is something that people are having trouble with, and you just have a high-level statement of it. So how do we know it's an ambiguous problem? Is there 2 signals. One is either the statement of the problem is too broad, there is just too much chaos, or the statement of the problem is too narrow. So these are the 2 indications where you would know that this is a very vaguely defined problem. So once it's done, you make plans. And what do I mean by make plans is that you set up based on, it could be the size of the organization that's feeling this. You set up, the timeline for conducting the design thinking sessions with the customer or with the users. And just so you know, design thinking, I want to step back and mention this. Design thinking can be done for anything, not just technology innovation. So like at Sodales, in our startup, we use design thinking for our marketing plans. We use design thinking for how we were going to target our own customers. So design thinking is something that you can use in your day-to-day problems too. Wherever you have a wicked problem, you can use design thinking. So I definitely want to say that. And in fact, many companies have used this, like Bank of America and other companies. They have actually used it to improve their customer service experience or their employee morale. So problems that are very hard to solve, design thinking was used to solve it. So sorry. So going back to this topic. So scoping is something that you'll do in advance. And once it is done, you'll do planning. So planning means that you work with your point of contact within that business group or user group, and you create group of 4 to 7 people who are representative of that problem. So when I say representative, it's really like a T-shaped approach where you have to go deep and you have to go wide. So instead of bringing SMEs, so example is, sorry, an example is that, sorry, I just dropped my cell phone. So an example is that in the past when we did a blueprint, we would bring SMEs for the same area and multiple ones of them and their managers. But in this case, you won't do that. You would bring one representative that touches that area, the decision maker, the front end, the back end, and the IT representative who's touching that mega process. So maximum people who are ideal for this kind of planning for conducting your workshops is a group of 4 to 7 people. If you have 13 or 16 people, like in some cases we saw that, then you divide them in different groups and you make them work on different problems. Don't give them the same problems. So having a smaller group allows you to have more productivity in your design thinking session. So once you have arranged that, then you can start working with the users. And so first thing is to find the problem. So if you remember, in the analytical approach, we were given sometimes the as-is documents, and we studied them on our plane or, in our free time and while drinking coffee. And then we came back and asked questions, and it was very black and white because we were assuming that everything that's written is up to date and everybody knows everything. But design thinking is going to surprise you in a way that you will learn that within the same group or within the same company, for doing the same task, there are 100 different ways that people are doing it, and everybody has their own story. And there's no really standard or 100% correct answer. And this is because everybody has a different habit and they have a different style. And this is where you actually take that flavor and put it into design thinking a solution output, because the people who are on the floor or the end users have already gotten some great ideas and shortcuts that you wouldn't even have thought about as a designer. So this is why 360-degree research comes into play, where you do your research. And the research here is not going online and reading about somebody. No, the research is that you actually go and watch people do their job. So, one thing you could do is spend 1 or 2 days going to the user's desk, sitting at their desk. Yeah, it sounds a bit weird, but maybe it's a mix of observation sessions and interview sessions. So you take a mixed group. And unlike the blueprinting approach where you had all the people sitting in one room and it was kind of very political, you actually go to individual people's desk who are part of this problem or who are touching this mega process. So 4 to 7 people you have identified. You go to their desk, you talk to them for 30 minutes, learn about their job, learn about their challenges, and then you watch them do that particular process that was given to you as a problem statement. And even just different touch points of their job, and if they have interaction within their job with other people, say with a printer or with the coffee machine or with a customer, or all the clutter at their desk, just watching all of that will give you some insights into what's really going on. So that's where you as a design thinker start clustering your own understanding. But you don't declare at that point any solutions, because you're not the one making solutions. They are the ones who are going to make solutions, but you have to observe everything. So once based on these observation sessions, which usually in our past for even some of the biggest customers, we were able to do in 2 days. And 2 days covered everything along with our summary of our insights. you're done to the rest of the design thinking phases. And for the rest of the design thinking phases, which is synthesis, ideation, prototyping, and validation, you're going to need the rest of the people in the room. So that's where you can have that one-day workshop. And what you do is, so sorry, I just want to step back and say one more thing, is that once you've done your research, it's your job at that point to figure out those high priority problem statements or personas that you want to pursue for that business process. So an example is reporting is a good example. Reporting is something that every company needs as a problem statement. Not enough reporting, or reporting has issues. Excuse me. So in that case, you figure out the personas that get touched by it. So instead of saying sales, marketing, and having too many personas, you maybe divide it into one or two personas, like management and end users, and that gives you that would give you a good understanding of how to draw your journey map. So once you know who is being affected by it most and what are the key areas you're going to focus on, those are the topics that you're going to run design thinking on. So you have to do the first two steps to be able to understand what the next steps are going to be. So once you are ready with your research and findings, that's when you bring everybody in the room, and usually in terms of groups, you have 4 to 7 people in each group. By that time, you have good market information, good situational information. You have known who the real experts are. You've also learned who are the biggest complainers, who are the people who resist changes in this company or user group, and who is suffering the most, who knows how to do their job best. And I think having that knowledge as a design thinker also would really help you to run the session very, very well. So once this is done, you bring everybody in a room, and has to be a very creative room. So creative room means that, if you remember, when we did blueprinting, we would bring people in a room and we had desks, and people are sitting at a desk, and we are kind of doing a PowerPoint presentation and also doing some demos. So don't do that. Instead, remove all computers from the room. Create like a party table, 2 different party tables like you have for lunch. And on the side of the walls, you have to put your your either whiteboard or charts and a lot of sticky notes, because you're going to need them. And also have something motivating, maybe a candy or chocolate to keep people going. So now I think the next few steps can be done in a few hours. Actually, 4 to 5 hours are enough. And what you do is, first step is to create journey maps. And for this, we need synthesis. And synthesis is exactly where you need your personas. So synthesis means a problem statement in that journey, which you can write down on one sticky note, so which you can fit in a sticky note. So for example is, I am going to draw a journey map for a taxi driver. That's an example. For a taxi driver, my journey map would be making a phone call, waiting for the taxi, getting into the taxi, providing my destination address. So these are different steps that as a persona or as a character I'm going through. So when you are writing, so first thing is you actually ask all the users who are in the room to write down their story and their synthesis in form of sticky notes. And so everybody will do that. And in the end, if you have 4 people in the room or 7 people in the room, 7 people will give you all of them will have their own steps. None of them will have the same story. So in the end, you will have different stories by these users for each of the persona. So once you have all the storytelling done, I just want to quickly show you what it looks like. Actually, it's in one of the previous slide. This is an example. So once you have the stories, you actually ask the users to come in and paste their stories, and everybody write their own version of the story on the wall. So if you see these vertical sticky notes in the same color, this just means that this is one person's story and this is another person's story. So they write their story, and based on that, what you identify is a high-level journey map. For example, even though somebody would have a different initial step, overall people would agree with one high level step that they follow for that process. But while you were doing that, you had that particular persona in mind. So it could be, you know, the end user or their management or you know, person working on the rig, what they're feeling, what their needs are. So in that case, you draw the story or the journey map, and once that is done, um, we go through this entire journey map and we start pointing out within your journey map, which is really based on the emotional feelings that the customers are going through or the users are going through. What are the places where there is a potential for improvement? And you mark those places. So you say whether it is an area where we could do a particular step in a better way. So that's where, once you mark those places, you can then start brainstorming ideas. So throughout this process, if you notice at this point, once you have written the stories, you have created a lot of choices for all sorts of stories because everybody had their own way of doing it. But then you have to converge all the stories into a high level journey map. Remember when they're writing this story and they're providing the insights about a process, it's not like your visual process flow that we use in the past. It's different, and it's very empathy based. And why it is that is because when you're writing those insights, you're considering a certain touch point, or you're considering a certain feeling. For example, somebody could write, um, I was surprised by the amount of cost that I had to pay for this. So, you know, people are actually writing what they're also feeling in that journey map. So it could be a touch point, it could be something that they felt, or it could be a situation that they encounter while going through that journey map. For example, a customer service agent could say, you know, when I get this phone call, sometimes I have to search and open my drawers and search for brochures. Or I have to go through 3 different screens to find this particular information. So, which is, you know, painful. But it shows you what other steps were happening in that situation. So make sure you capture that in your journey mapping. So from there, you start looking at what are the ideas that we could use to improvise and improve that situation. And right there is, once the ideation phase is done, you take the most promising ideas, and everybody comes in and presents their ideas, and that's where people go back, divide in groups, and start creating paper prototypes of what it would look like visually. And that's where you have a bit struggle too, because a lot of people are very theoretical and may not know how to draw things, and that's where we have to sometimes help them a little bit. And the prototyping phase is all about being able to scrap prototypes, and then from there, everybody comes in front of the room and start presenting their prototype, that this is how they would solve it. And that's where you are also surfacing key assumptions, because maybe the person who made the prototype or this group had marketing and sales knowledge more, and they didn't consider something that, you know, IT needed, or there's another insight that accounting needed. So that's where you surface your key assumptions about that prototype by presenting it to the group and getting the feedback. So the design thinker is not doing all the work, the users are doing it, we're just guiding them to do it. And out of this, you should have at least 10 or depending on the process, you should have some 5 to 10 good prototypes that you can start validating with different users and key stakeholders. And that's again creating a lot of choices at this stage. And then once that is done, um, your 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 prototype has to show something that feels like how the solution will operate. You have to make sure that happens, that it shows that it will how it will actually operate in real life. And then in the validation and implementation is once you know what prototypes are workable and have allowed us to visualize our final end solution. Using those storyboards, you can now create mockups, and mockups could be created in PowerPoint, or if it's some promising mockup, then it could be even created in a system simulation to show the functionality and with the information, and that from there you can start implementing it. And this becomes the first stage of your implementation instead of creating a blueprint. And at this point, you can create a design thinking assessment report, which is similar to a blueprint, but at this point, you have actually made people hands-on to create the solution, and you have figured out the right problem. And in our case, this is almost 5% of an upfront investment, which eliminated 90% of the future risk of failure. And that's what we have found. And once you've done the design thinking, once you've done that, then of course you have a vision of what direction you want to go to. That's where you then start taking and combining the design thinking approach to agile methodology, because that's now the new way of doing things. Instead of working in isolation and taking blueprint documents, you actually start using agile methodology, where once you have a basic prototype, you set up basic settings in it, you personalize it, and after that you validate it and make it more stronger and stronger as it builds. And when I call sprints of 2 weeks, it just means that you have to make sure that you are involving the users and feedback. So if you remember, the design thinking initial phase was done with a smaller group, but when you start going towards, but it was a diverse group. You had to make sure that it was a diverse group. But now once you have a prototype, you're going to other users, you are going to now verify it with a larger group. And as you move forward with your development, you are rolling out these prototypes to a larger and a larger group to get more feedback. And in the end, you have a solution that everybody built together. And for me, rollout really means that's where you do all the technical type of and heavy integration work as well. And we've really used a lot of it in custom applications, especially on the mobile and Fiori side. And we noticed that it allowed us to do work very, very quickly in just a matter of weeks, even if we were building something from scratch. So this was some timeline that we want to show that overall this was implementation timeline and how it saved time and cost. Quickly, just so you know why we have had such a good feedback from our customers on it, is that when we did design thinking, it allowed them to focus on big picture and not try to worry about every single thing and features and details up front and sign off on those heavy blueprint documents. And it also improved their user commitment and fear. It reduced the fear because, initially people were afraid what they were signing up for. So that's why they mainly loved it. And similarly for executives, they liked the fact that they did not go ahead and build something nobody even needed. It allowed them to make everybody creative, whether it's a clerk or a manager or an executive. Everybody was being creative, and everybody can be creative if you follow the steps. And from IT side as well, even though you start with the problem statement that IT has given you, or you are the IT, what they loved about it, that they actually were able to break down some of the barriers and knowledge gaps, and they force the users to actually adopt the solution because they're the one who created it. And in many cases, design thinking allowed customers to leverage a lot of what they already had in their platform. So it allowed them to leverage their investments more effectively. So here's a case study. It says by one of the automotive service industry company in US, and we are charged to scope a business intelligence project. And also, given that they had a very highly complex, heterogeneous landscape with many, many, many systems, and they also wanted to improve operational efficiencies and customer service. So there were so many problem statements and very, very broad problem statement that was given to us. And in 1 week of work is that we achieved this success. So I'm going to show you what was the business challenges. Was we took actually one of the mega process to solve these challenges. So heterogeneous landscape, of course, affected this process too. So we chose one of the process that we could use for design thinking, but it would also have allowed us to solve the other problems that they had given, which is operational efficiency, customer service, and heterogeneous landscape. So just choosing one process to begin with brought a clarity. So the business challenge within this process was, of course, month-end reconciliation as well, and of course, the other things that I noticed about operational reporting. So our approach was we took one mega process. We used 2 days for user interviews and observation sessions. And when I say travel process, we touched different diverse users who were part of that travel process, whether at the branch level, online, group travel, all sorts of different representatives. So it was about 16 people and included in executives, IT, and accounting representative. Each one group had one representative. We conducted the observation and interview sessions individually, but we conducted the workshop, of course, with the groups by dividing them in 2 different groups. And we found in our first 2 days that there were almost 100 issues, but we focused on the key personas, which were we actually created 2 personas and made them create their journey maps. And in the end, we were able to come up with 51 recommendations and 5 top categories that we could summarize them. And that's how we got the big picture of the problem. And to our surprise, the problem was never at the reporting area. The problem was not with the fact that they needed a lot of operational reporting. The problem was with the data input side. And that's what design thinking brought, clarity to. We learned that not only we learned the right problem, but also we were able to create what the future views would going to be, what is going to be our recommendation for solution strategy, what is going to be, if they do it, what is going to be the project plan, what would it look like, what technology infrastructure they're going to need, what would be the cost to do that. And we had created the solution prototypes too in just 3 days. And then once we left, we did the assessment report offsite, and that was done in the next 2 weeks, just because we wanted to run our prototypes for feedback and input. And I think the biggest success out of this was that we found that we didn't need to build the big complex BI reporting solution. In fact, we needed to fix the data input problem and make it more simpler, and that would actually influence the customer service, and that would also fix the problems with the accounting reconciliation and reporting, and as well as the heterogeneous landscape, which was causing them to log into multiple systems for every single transaction. Using this user experience or data input improvement approach would actually solve that as well, because so that was the right solution that actually users came up with. And then the funny thing that they found was that they had a lot more information in their system and a lot more data fields in their system and parameters that they didn't even need, because their business model had completely changed. So we were able to find the right problem, and we actually did a ROI analysis, and just per site. This was our yearly waste that we calculated. And this is just one process and one problem. And this was actually timed. We actually timed it. But how would you do if you do it with the current system versus if you do it with the new approach? What could be the time savings that could occur? And that is what we found. And so I think in the end, not only this is something design thinking allowed us to find the right problem, but also allowed us to save them from a project that they didn't even need to do. And these are some of the examples of how people had different stories. If you see, these are each of these is a different story for the user from the users. And this is where we did clustering and ideation and kind of clustered the main ideas, grouped them, and started to mark what problems we needed to solve. And this is kind of hard to see, but this was our overall agreed upon journey map. So this is our overall success story with design thinking. So this brings us to the end of the presentation. If you would like to learn more about design thinking and how it can help you, I'd be happy to conduct an Envision workshop with you, and or even if to see if this is something that you need, I'm happy to do that. You can email me, or if you I will also share with you my recent blogs on design thinking that have the step-by-step process of doing it. So I am thinking that at this point, I could take your questions, if there are any questions. So if you have any questions, please type them into the chat box, and I'd be happy to answer. Okay, I have one question here. So the question is that how do we educate the users about the benefit of design thinking? So I think this is a very good question. Initially, we had a lot of struggle because when we spoke to, say, IT users, we had struggled because we were given a task and we were told to execute it. And it was very, very hard to convince them to say, let's go back and start over again, especially in some cases. IT had spent significant amount of time, months, in exploring the problem and creating an IT strategy. So now when we come in and say we want to do design thinking, it kind of says that we don't believe the strategy that you have created and we need to kind of recreate it. So it was a bit challenging for us to convince them, but I think where we saw was that when we showed them some case studies and we showed them how it involved the end users in a way that it made them adopt the solution eventually, because that is one of the biggest KPI for IT users, is that business has to adopt a solution. That's where they were most interested to learn about design thinking, and were willing to invest the time and their people's schedule to do something like this. So this was our experience. I think what I've learned is that it's always about educating the users for the options, and then making it, when you're doing this for the first time, to have a quick win. Use one of the most painful problem and solve that first, and stay high level. Even if within that problem you have hundreds small problems and more detailed problems, keep the first one high level, and then later you can have multiple design thinking on each of the individual problems that are part of that process. You can have mini design sessions on those, but I think the first time, try to hit a problem where you can actually demonstrate the ROI effect. So that was our experience. Okay. Okay, so I see another question. So the question is about Fiori and mobile projects. So this methodology is not specific to Fiori and mobile projects. Yes, with Fiori and mobile projects, SAP is putting a lot of push to do this, but you can use this methodology in any project. And an example that I gave you was with the automotive service company. We actually applied it to their travel process. And in the past, we have used it for reporting projects. We have also used it for a supply chain project. And what you have to know is uh, what you have to do is making sure that the problem is that you have the right audience in the room, and also the problem statement is vague. So no, it's not just for Fiori. And I think the second question, another question is that for the ideation phase, can you recommend approaches beyond brainstorming? Okay, so I can answer that. Brainstorming is the recommended approach, but if you are trying to do something like this, where you have some users off-site, I can understand how brainstorming would not work. So in that case, what you do is you have the journey maps where you can create something visually. And I'll just show you how I did this. You look at this page right here, the journey map. So what you can do is when you get to the ideation phase, and you're not able to get everybody in the room, you could actually take the journey map and go to these groups, either individually or if you're doing it online, and you show them the visual journey map and get their feedback and ideas, and then you're the one who's clustering all of the ideas. Because we have had situations where we work with customers who couldn't do it on site with us, or we couldn't be on site. So we divided the phases of the design thinking where we hadn't done the research and this observation in a more of an interview fashion. And then we did the ideation phase using more of a picture approach. But that's where you have to make sure that you are giving something very visual that kind of touches their heart and they're able to open up. So I hope that answers your question. Okay, so if there are no more other questions, I think we can conclude the webinar, but please email me your questions and I would be happy to answer anything that you have. Just remember when you're doing design thinking is that you can divide the phases. Just make sure that once you have your prototypes or the people who are involved in the ideation and prototypes, you have to have your decision makers there, because otherwise you'll be running around with your prototypes and nobody's going to sign off, and it then defeats the whole purpose of doing it to begin with. So you can definitely divide the different phases in different locations. For example, the research phase could be done on site, on premise, and then the design thinking, rest of the phases could be done in a room. But then the validation and feedback could be done even off-site with the journey maps. But make sure you have the right people, same people involved before you have your high fidelity prototype. Don't go to a larger group. Work with the focused group until you have your high fidelity prototype, and then go to the next level of groups. Thank you very much. I really appreciate this and your time, and I look forward to seeing you in our next webinar, where we'll go through more step-by-step procedure of design thinking. And this time we'll actually use a Fiori app example with design thinking innovation. I wish everybody a great day, and thank you again.